Man, have we got somebody special for you for this half hour. My next guest is Doug Lipp, the former head of the employee training team at Disney's corporate headquarters. He's the author of Disney U, How Disney University Develops the World's Most Engaged, Loyal, and Customer-Centric Employees. Go buy his book because they're the master of this, and the book is about revealing the heart of the Disney culture and describes the company's values and operational philosophies that support the iconic brand. Most of you have been to Disneyland or Disney World, and seen what Doug's talking about. I've been there. It's unbelievable. Doug, tell us about your book and what we should look forward to. And welcome.
Well, Fran, thank you very much. And first of all, I'm so thrilled to chat with you because I know what you have done over the years to help promote small business. And really, the idea in Disney U that I'm writing about is for any organization. And some people might say, gosh, if I had the mouse and if I had the Tony Award-winning and Oscar Award-winning movies, I'd have no problem getting motivated employees. But really what I write about in Disney U is creating an organizational culture. And that is something that any organization, regardless of headcount, regardless of budget, regardless of how many years they've been in business, can absolutely attain. And so it's really something that is a recipe for creating that environment. It's not a how-to book, but it's more about creating that environment where your employees want to not only work for you, but they want to engage customers, guests, patients, whatever you call the people that pay for your services, to make those experiences and those touch points even stronger than they already are.
There is a reason that things happen, and there's a reason things don't happen. And we go into a Disney experience and say, well, this is just great and wonderful, but it just happens. There's a reason it happens. Now, when I've heard about this before and never really talked to anybody about how this all happens. I've heard there was a university there and people had to go through training, but a lot of people have training. When you come to work at Disney, tell me about the university. How much time is there? What you do? How do you engage them? So forth.
Well, that's really important when you talk about how do you engage, because there's engaging in the classroom and then there's also engaging after they've left the classroom. And that's the key, Fran, is that what's taught in the Disney University is exactly what's expected and supported on the front lines. And this really goes back to the man I write about in Disney University, the founder of the Disney University, who was hired by Walt Disney. This guy's name is Fran, and he is an unsung hero in the success of the Disney Corporation. And Walt basically said, Van, I've built Disneyland. I've built the rides and the attractions that are world-class, and now I want you to train employees, 16 to 17, 18-year-old kids who don't know anything about show business, to create the world's most friendly environment, the happiest place on earth. And so what Van and Walt did together was to create an environment, like I mentioned earlier, that says what we talk about in the university, not only between trainers and trainees, but is exactly what the operators and the directors and the vice presidents on the front lines are talking about. There is a continuity. So I'll give you an example. When we would talk about teamwork and we would talk about cleanliness and friendliness in the university, at the end of 8 hours of sprinkling pixie dust on people's heads, and we'd take them out into the park during operating hours, my new hires would see multiple examples of executives or other employees who were not custodians walking across the park and picking up trash. And at that moment, everything that we had talked about in the university sunk in.
You took them from the classroom and put them out in the park and let them see exactly what goes on.
Yes. And there was continuity, because all too often I see organizations that will slap on the side of their building their training division, such and such university, with all the best intentions, and they might have really good programs, but if there is a discrepancy or disparity between what's taught and what's actually happening on the front lines, the front lines will always win.
All right. The new employee coming into this Disney U, is it a 1 day, 2 day, 5 day, 2 week? How long do they go there?
Sure. It really depends on what they're going to be doing. But generally speaking, the orientation into the company culture and the history is about 1 day. And then depending on what job they have, if they're in food and beverage or security or ride operations, they will go into the operation division that they report to and spend an additional 2 to 4 days with on-the-job training. So in total, Fran, it's about 5 days of onboarding.
All right, let me ask you this. Everybody is not going to get it, right?
Right.
Is there accountability there? They go through the training, they go out, and let's say they just don't have that it factor to do the things that they were taught, to do the things that expected, that they're reaching the standards. What happens then?
Well, certainly there are consequences if people don't get the training. But even before that, what I see with Disney and I see with a lot of really good organizations, large and small, is being very judicious in who you're bringing on in the first place. And the idea is to hire that attitude that you know is going to survive in that very demanding environment at the theme park, and then training them, as opposed to training a whole bunch of people and then having a washout factor that costs a lot of money in the end.
So the selection of the people is important. I'm sure that's a process that Disney goes through and looks at background, interviews people, selects like we do on a football team. You know, we want Colin Kaepernick to be our quarterback. We got to, he makes a difference that you can't just train, but you're starting out with some skill set that fits what you want these people to do.
Exactly. Metaphorically, like you're saying, you got to have tryouts. So the tryout is the interview process, and there are so many robust, wonderful interview techniques that organizations can use that are much better than just asking questions and listening to a pat response, is having people actually role play out situations that they're going to face in the workplace so that you can weed out well in advance those employees that just don't have what it takes.
So the selection, and this is something, we've got so many entrepreneurs and business people that are growing businesses that are listening to us on this show. And by the way, you're listening to Doug Lipp, the former head of the employee training team at Disney's, and he's got a great new book out called Disney U: How Disney University Develops the World's Most Engaged, Loyal, and Customer-Centric Employees. And it's something that is a great lesson for all of us at far smaller companies. But just as important as a big company, and maybe more important because at your small companies, you and I and a couple of people are seeing and interfacing with all of our customers every day. So we can all learn something from this. So let's talk about the selection process, the recruiting process, the interviewing process. During this process, I would imagine they have a good expectation of what they've got to do to be able to be a valued partner at Disney.
Yeah, in fact, that's a really interesting point because, for example, in Euro Disney, Disneyland Paris, the organization had to hire thousands of cast members in a few months, people that didn't have any idea what was going on behind the walls of the Magic Kingdom. So as an example, Fran, the casting office, the recruiting office that was set up even before the park was completely finished was made to reflect the environment of the theme park so that they had cues, lines that had TVs that would show what it's like to be a cast member during the day, and there were posters and pictures, and the way that the prospective employees were treated with respect was an extension of how guests or customers within the Magic Kingdom are treated. And so most definitely that onboarding process, even from the minute you start the interview, is an extension of the organizational culture, and Disney does a phenomenal job of making sure that early stage really does reflect not only the fun, but also the challenges that everyone's going to have in creating that happiest place on earth. And having that honest dialogue up front is much better than shocking someone negatively after they've been hired and they realize, wow, working here is a lot more difficult than coming here as a guest.
Talk to me about culture a little bit. I'll start with, my first Disney experience, of course, was in Los Angeles, and I loved that Disney park out there. And now you go from California, Southern California, and the culture there, all the way to Orlando, Florida, which is kind of it's kind of a farm town. Citrus grows, orange grows all over the place, and much different type of environment. Did they have to change, or did you have to change the approach because of culture differences from those two parts of this country?
Well, even from Florida, then you go to Tokyo, Japan, you go to Hong Kong, you go to Paris, Shanghai is going to be in 2015. Certainly, regional differences exist. For example, in the United States, we do not allow alcohol in the parks, but in France, they sell wine. So there are certain areas where you say we're not going to budge. In other areas, you say we got to be creative here. But the most important thing is when you create those fundamental values, how true to those values are you staying as a business owner? As you alluded earlier, for the small business, every touch point is that much more important than with a large corporation. And I love your comment in your book, One More Customer, when you talk about getting existing customers to come back more often and buy more. The fundamental culture at Disney is education is valued, and entertaining education is valued. And so there's a great quote from the man who wrote the foreword to Disney U. His name is Jim Cora, and he retired as the chairman of Disneyland International. He was my boss in Japan. He opened up all the international parks, and he was also one of the founding members of Disney University. And he said, marketing is the investment you make to get people in the door, whether it's employees or customers. That's how you attract people. Training is the investment you make to get them to come back, meaning customers, and get them to stay, meaning employees. So you've got that repeat loyal customer who's coming back one more time, and you've got that low turnover rate with employees. So you're not having this revolving door which wastes time, energy, and money to keep hiring and training new employees. So the culture, your question you're asking earlier is, even Walt Disney was a huge proponent of employee education. Even well before Disneyland was ever opened, he brought in real creative thought leaders into the Disney studios to work with his animators. One such person, Frank Lloyd Wright, just to help these animators get beyond their writer's block. So that's part of the DNA of the Disney company, is the value of education.
Well, it sounds like that they're continuing to push the envelope. They're not satisfied with where they are. They want to get better, and it starts with the customer experience. You're so right. The customer experience. If the customer experience is great, they'll come back. They'll tell other people, and that's for all you people out there listening. It's in your mom and pop business too. The customer experience has got to be just as pleasant and reinforcing as your experience at Disney, and that's a great message. Let me just reset one more time, Doug. This is the Fran Tarkenton Show. We're on Sirius Indy 104, and we're glad to have you with the program. And we're here with the author of Disney U, Doug Lipp. On how Disney University develops the world's most engaged, loyal, and customer-centric employees. You can go out and buy this book, I'm sure, on Amazon.com, and also the other book companies out there. And I want to recommend this book to you because it's the essence of business. Is right here in what Disney has done and the culture that they have built and have to continue to improve. You don't stand still, do you, Doug?
No, Fran, you mentioned earlier as well, you got to keep challenging the status quo, and that's the brilliance of both Walt Disney, of Van France, the man whom I write about in Disney U, and all the legends that I interviewed when I wrote this book, many of whom were my colleagues or my bosses or bosses' bosses when I was in the company. And here's a quote from Van France, again, the founder of the university, when he was making a proposal to improve the training program. And this gives you the irascible, creative nature of this man in the company. He says, quote, "The trouble with people is that we get hardening of the mental arteries, cirrhosis of the enthusiasm, and arthritis of the imagination." How cool is that as a way to start off a proposal to Walt Disney that you want to improve training?
That's really cool. And so, no question, Van France has a big footprint and impact on the Disney empire, and certainly you. What was his background? Where did he learn all this?
He came out of the manufacturing environment. He was working in factories during World War II, so he was strictly in a factory environment. And what he brought to Disney was that outsider's perspective. And how do you take that factory environment, whether it's building airplanes for the war effort or it's a theme park? Because quite frankly, a theme park is really a giant factory with heavy machinery and dangerous stuff into which you invite the public that is oftentimes in vacation mode, kind of wandering around, half enthralled with stuff and walking into walls. And so what Van brought to the picture was the ability to simplify the complex and make sure that every cast member knew exactly what he or she had to do without having to carry around a 50-page human resources manual to remind themselves of what the priorities were.
I didn't think about it so much. You just triggered a thought. With all the rides and all the activities, safety is, I've always been in a Disney park, and I feel totally safe on rides. I feel safe in the environment. Man, but I didn't think of that before, because you've got to have a discipline there and to keep that park safe.
I just wrote a blog last week about Disney posted a 53% increase in profits at theme parks and resorts worldwide, and there is something that's been in place for 40-plus years at Disney theme parks and resorts. It was started by Van France and another gentleman at Disney by the name of Dick Nunes, and it's called Safety, Courtesy, Show, Efficiency. And those 4 words, Fran, are the essence of the secret of Disney. Is safety is number 1 for employees and cast members. And then comes courtesy. So, for example, if somebody asks you where the restroom is, you stop doing what you're doing, you engage eye contact, you smile, and guide them with an open hand as opposed to keeping looking down and pointing with a single finger. Safety, courtesy, show meant how clean is the environment, how clean is your uniform or your costume or the grounds or the bathrooms. Safety, courtesy, show, and then the 4th on that priority list, Fran, is numbers of people through the attractions is where you make your money. And the company is absolutely rabid about maintaining safety, courtesy, and show, and if you attain those capacities and the numbers of people coming through will take care of themselves, and you will have profits. All too often I see organizations that turn that model upside down and go for the numbers, and that is not a sustainable model.
No, you're all over it. Now, in your book, you take us through all the history of that, the content of that, the thought process of that, and now the one thing that amazes me is Disney has been around the Disney parks for over 50, 60 years or more.
Yep. Yeah, started in 55, Disneyland.
All right, we've got Walt Disney's gone.
Yep.
And you got different management, but you've had a lot of different management over the last 20 years. How does Disney continue to reinvent itself, to be able to get better, to make the experience better? How does this happen when you've gone through, the founder's gone and Van France is gone, but it seems to continue to go in the right direction?
Well, certainly, Fran, in the mid-1980s, Disney had its troubles, and there were actually 3 leveraged buyout attempts, and we almost lost the entire corporation.
That's right,
because of our resistance to change. And so we did fall into that trap. And in fact, one of the interviewees for Disney U is the former vice chair of Imagineering, the teams that create all these great rides. His name is Marty Sklar, and he said the brilliance of Walt Disney was that he always had one foot in the past and one foot in the future. And there are very few single individuals who have that ability. So the key is to have a balanced team. So whether it was Walt Disney, who was kind of a dreamer, and his brother Roy Disney, who was the operations expert, the doer, or you had Michael Eisner, who actually is one of the endorsers of Disney U. Michael Eisner came on board and helped us rewrite the ship, so to speak, and he brought on board a guy named Frank Wells, who was the operations guru. So the answer to your question is to have that balance in your leadership and ownership team of the dreamers, the Walt Disney kind of people, and the doers, the Roy Disneys or the Frank Welleses of the world, who focus on the details and the operations and the strategies, and to have that kind of a creative tension between those opposite ends of that creativity continuum is vitally important. And as soon as you're out of balance, your days are numbered.
Now, as I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, when Disney went to France, it didn't work out for a while. Is it doing better now?
Yes, much better. In fact, one of the problems when Euro Disney or Disneyland Paris Resort, as it's now known, opened up was in Europe there was a tremendous recession, and so that was just like nobody would have done well. And the biggest problem wasn't the theme park per se; it was overbuilding the hotel rooms. But it's doing much better. All the parks are doing well. In fact, probably the best run park still to this day is the first international theme park that I was involved in that opened 30 years ago, and that's Tokyo Disneyland.
I didn't realize that. The first Disney park outside of America was in Tokyo?
Yep, it opened up in 1983 in April.
And still going strong?
Still going strong. And I speak fluent Japanese, Fran, so I was involved in a lot of the build-up of that park and getting the Disney University started over there.
And most of the people, I would imagine, that you hired in the park for Tokyo and also in France were probably French and Japanese people.
Exactly. Yep. And we had to convey the Disney culture in a different language, in a different environment. And again, those kinds of things where that education is valued, those are timeless and those transcend all cultures.
Now, in each country, in Japan and in France, you just have one park in each country?
Well, there's a couple of gates in Japan. It's known as Tokyo Disneyland, and then right across the parking lot is Tokyo Disney Sea. It's often referred to as the second gate, and that's really the model that you see in a lot of the resorts. As you open up with the Magic Kingdom, or you open up with one park and then you expand into a different theme. Much like in California, you've got Disneyland, and you've got Disney's California Adventure right across the parking lot.
Okay, Doug, we have about 1 minute left here, and this is Doug Lipp, who has written the book, Disney U, How Disney University Develops the World's Most Engaged, Loyal, and Customer-Centric Employees. Why did you do this book?
Because I wanted to transform the things that I learned from Van France directly and indirectly from Walt Disney into a tool that can be used by anyone, because it is such a simple and a remarkable tool. And there is a quote that I want to end with Walt Disney that embodies what we did in the Disney University about entertaining and educating at the same time. And here's the quote, Fran. Walt said, "When the subject permits, we let fly with all the satire and gags at our command. Laughter is no enemy to learning." I love that quote.
Boy, that's great. Now, Doug, quickly, you're living in Sacramento now. Are you active, or you're writing books, obviously?
Writing books, consulting, giving keynotes around the world about this concept.
Well, great. Go buy his book. It's Doug Lipp's book. It's Disney U, How Disney University Develops the World's Most Engaged, Loyal, and Customer-Centric Employees. You'll be glad you did. It's a great read. You can get it at all the bookstores. You get it on Amazon.com. We've been blessed to have Doug Lipp with us. And, Doug, we thank you for being with us, and we wish you nothing but the very best. This is the Fran Tarkenton Show. Stay with us.